Hey YouTubers, it's Charlie. Big Game of Thrones news happening this week. So they're having the TCAs. George R. R. Martin already talked about his delay for Winds of Winter. That was the big news earlier this week. But now the big news is that they're finishing discussions for seasons 7 and 8, and HBO is still trying to get more out of Dan and Dave. And the other really awesome thing is they confirmed the premiere date. Game of Thrones Season 6, Episode 1 will be on April 24th of this year, just bumped by a couple weeks. Normally it would be that first week in April, but the vinyl series is pushing into April just by a little bit, so they're just giving a little bit of breathing room. Still happening in April, so everybody breathe a sigh of relief. What HBO brass, like what the big important people at HBO are saying, is that they're finishing negotiations for seasons 7 and 8, and as much as they want 10 seasons of Game of Thrones, Dan and Dave said that they're feeling, like they said earlier in the year at the Emmys, that they feel like 8 seasons is all they have left in them. Mostly, I think that's a creative thing, in terms of story material from the story that they're doing. Obviously, there's a lot more in George R. R. Martin's books, but because of what they've cut out and the pace they're moving at, they feel like 8 seasons is where they're going to hit that end point. But if it's taken them over a year to figure out a contract for season 7 and 8 for all the actors, everyone involved, then I wouldn't plan on season 8 being the absolute last season of Game of Thrones until season 8 finishes airing. So bare minimum what we're looking at here is 2 more years of Game of Thrones after this year. What about the spin-off? George R. R. Martin has a bunch of shows in development at HBO. One of them, he said, is super secret and he can't talk about. That might be a Game of Thrones spin-off. The weird thing about HBO when it bought the rights to do the Game of Thrones A Song of Ice and Fire series is that I believe that their deal only included the main Song of Ice and Fire novels. So we're just talking about the main novels. I'm assuming that doesn't include Dunk and Egg or any other books that George R. R. Martin might write inside that universe. There is a book called Fire and Blood that George R. R. Martin is planning on writing, but not for a long time, not until he finishes Dream of Spring. And it would be a retelling of the complete history of the Targaryen family. It'd be like if he rewrote Song of Ice and Fire and all the other novels just from the perspective of the Targaryens. But given the amount of time it's taken him to finish Winds of Winter, I wouldn't plan on seeing that book before 2020. The Game of Thrones HBO series will be long done by the time he gets ready to write that book. So HBO's comment about seasons 7 and 8 really didn't include any specific spin-off talk, but I think that they would probably just wait to talk about a spin-off if they were developing one, which I think that they are, till we get closer to season 8. I don't think there's a lot of incentive for them to do a spin-off series right now. Like, while you just have the main series, it's this really precious commodity, and if you know that you're going to be getting this other thing, then suddenly the main show seems a little bit less precious. What does that mean for the plot of A Song of Ice and Fire? Because, a lot of season 6 is extrapolated from stuff that they think that George R. R. Martin is doing. They haven't read Winds of Winter, they haven't read Dream of Spring, but they probably have an idea for where the characters are headed. So big signposts that we can point to, and we know they're going to have to address at a certain point. The War for the Dawn. What's going on with mysterious character that's coming back? What's he going to do when he comes back? When is Daenerys going to bring her dragons and her army to Westeros? And what is going to happen in the South? What is going to happen in King's Landing? Who will take over the realm and rule in the ashes of the War for the Dawn? I think it's been to the TV show's benefit that it doesn't try to do every single thing from the books. It doesn't get too sprawling, which actually is one of the criticisms of George R. R. Martin, is that his books have gotten so big that it becomes a problem for him to wrap up storylines. Now, some people say the show makes it way too simple, and that is a fair criticism. But I think based on the characters the show has introduced and the directions that it's taken them, it'll be much easier for them to wrap up their narrative in a satisfying way. It also doesn't hurt that since the very beginning of Book 1, they keep repeating the line, "Winter is coming, war is coming." There was a little bit of drama on Twitter this morning. You may have seen the author of the Outlander books. They do a series on Starz based on the Outlander books, also somewhat sci fantasy genre, took a shot at George R. R. Martin by saying that she is not going to let the series pass her books. What she actually said is that she's not going to pull a George R. R. Martin and just not write whenever she travels. If you've never heard George R. R. Martin's process, he has like a very specific process for how he writes books. It's been very successful, so I'm not going to criticize it. Unless you're a more popular writer than George R. R. Martin, I feel like you can't criticize him. J.K. Rowling can criticize George R. R. Martin all she wants. All other authors, unless Tolkien rises from the grave to criticize George R. R. Martin, cannot criticize George. But I wasn't sitting in the audience. I'm sure she's going to apologize soon. Like, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to make fun of George R. R. Martin. I'm just saying that I'm not going to let my series pass my books. So no need to send her hate mail or anything like that. But if you haven't been watching Outlander, Blackjack, that one of the big villains from that series, is actually Edmure Tully from Game of Thrones, which is probably why we haven't seen Edmure for a while. I know there's a lot of rumors that we're going to see the Blackfish again during Season 6, so I'll be really excited to go back to the Riverlands. But even if the show circles back around to Riverrun and we get Blackfish, I don't think that guarantees that we'll see Edmure. I don't know if he's going to be guest starring this season. But here's my big question for you guys. Let me know in the comments. So jump forward a year till the end of Season 7 of Game of Thrones. If HBO is able to get a couple more seasons out of Dan and Dave, like say, okay, we're going to make it an even 10, what additional things do you want them to do from the books? What I think would happen in that scenario is they would still try to keep a big season-long War for the Dawn, White Walkers versus the armies of man, in a single season. So they would push that to Season 10 instead of doing it in Season 8. But then you have to replace that in Season 8 and Season 9 with something else. So I think probably the easiest way to do that is to, maybe introduce one or two additional characters you cut out, maybe like a young Griff type character, and then just go deeper into the characters you already have. Spend more time on character development. One of the biggest problems with the show with a cast that big, Game of Thrones has one of the biggest casts ever on television, is that you just can't spend time with every single person as much as others. So what you've seen happen over the last 5 seasons is that the show has its main cast and it has its supporting characters. The main cast get the most screen time. Just imagine spending more time in Dorne with the Martell characters. Imagine more flashbacks to Robert's Rebellion. There are all kinds of things they can do to add to the narrative without getting too bloated. And in slightly related news, I know some of you are asking me if Natalie Dormer spoiled Game of Thrones Season 6 or part of Game of Thrones Season 6 when she went on Jimmy Kimmel. Not technically. We kind of have a pretty good idea of what's happening in Season 6. They're really just looping back around and grabbing book plots that they didn't do in previous seasons. So really the surprises that I'm expecting are just the scale, like what things actually look like, how crazy it actually gets. Like, X, Y, Z characters are all going to meet in a place, do a big thing. You just don't know how crazy it's going to look or what's going to happen after it. So no, I'm not really too worried about spoilers or anything like that. Congratulations to last week's giveaway winner, Nathan Beard. You won a $20 Amazon gift card. Please private message me on the back end of my channel so I can get your contact details. And there is a new round of the giveaway starting now. All you have to do to enter that is be a subscriber and leave a comment on this video. If there's anything you guys really want me to do for next week's Game of Thrones video, just let me know in the comments. If you guys don't know what's going on with the Winds of Winter delay, you can click here for that video. It's my giant Game of Thrones Season 6 playlist with all my videos. And you can click here for the brand teaser that HBO just dropped. Thank you so much for watching. Everybody, let's high five. I'll see you guys tonight.